You guys can see my screen okay?
Yes.
All right, perfect.
All right, so I'm speaking first. Our access and capital markets company was AirBnB, and it was done by myself, Damien, and Gary. If we go to the next slide, please, Damien. So what is the business? Airbnb was founded in 2008 in San Francisco by Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia, as well as Nathan Blukarczyk. It was founded after the trio was struggling to pay rent and decided to rent out a spare room to subsidize their rent money. In order to facilitate this, they built a website to advertise their space, thus conceiving the now multi-billion-dollar company Airbnb. Airbnb is referred to as a service as a software company, or SaaS, that provides a platform for hosts to post their lodgings and for users to peruse them. This provides customers an opportunity to achieve a more authentic holiday experience and destination rather than that of a hotel or villa with its cheesy tourist activities. It also serves to cut out the pesky and needless middleman in rental agreements, allowing for a smoother holiday destination. Airbnb hosts over 150 million users, and on average, every night, 2 million Airbnbs are being used. With 7 million total listings and a stock valuation of over $35 billion after the last round of funding, they operate in over 190 countries in the world, and some of the most popular destinations are Paris, Sydney, Manhattan, and Rome, just to name a few. So yeah, if we can go to the next slide.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, like we said, they were Airbnb was founded by Brian Chesky, Joe Gebbia. I don't know, I'm not really sure how to say his name, but basically throughout their history, there's been a lot of problems and issues through the attempt to start up the company. The first issue, which was an idea that everybody had when they started, was you can't just invite random people into your house, and that there could be dangerous people, people who might hurt you or threaten to steal things, and or people not having good pictures showing what their listing actually is, which would also discourage use. And throughout these problems, we've always just continued to solve them ourselves and built up our network around what we need to survive anyways. I don't know if you guys remember, but there's a little picture up here when there was Captain McCain's and Obama O's, but that was actually a product of Airbnb getting started. They made about $30,000 from those cereal boxes to put towards starting up their company.
So the business model, Airbnb is a participant in what is called the sharing economy, and it shares this economy with other companies like Lyft and Uber, as well as Craigslist and eBay, which have been around for far longer. So the sharing economy is the commercial or economic model that is also called the peer-to-peer economy, and it involves providing a service that connects buyers and sellers more easily to allow for the exchange of goods and services. Companies like Airbnb don't make money directly off the provision of those services or the sale of those goods, but rather they take commission from each payment for the provision of the service. Airbnb uses this model to charge hosts with a 3% fee for every completed booking. However, they don't stop there. Guests are charged a non-refundable service fee based on the type of listing, and it can get up to 14.2%. But this is adjusted for groups with larger bookings or more expensive bookings so that guests may save money for other travel expenses. Users are subjected to a value-added tax, or VAT, and this is added onto the final sale in the European Union, Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, and South Africa. If the booking is paid in a currency different to that of the host, then an exchange rate is set and applied by Airbnb, which they'll also fleece you on in order to make money.
So then going a little bit further, the actual advantages that Airbnb enjoys, one of the biggest one is for any online intermediary or any company that uses software as a service, you're saving a ton of money on operation. Also, you're saving money on maintenance for the actual properties because that's something that the hosts will be taking care of themselves. Again, they were one of the first people that entered this market, which means that they had a whole bunch of untapped potential. And then also relying heavily on the network effect. Once they started to get into that, it exponentially could spread into other areas. And they have about 20%, I believe, is the number now of the market for this type of technology. Also, the fact that they have this larger percentage of the market that also gives them the ability to lower costs for their booking and not even have subscription fees or lower also property fees for hosts and travelers, which would then incite more use, which would spread them even further. Also going into their competition, since it's so hard to get into it, I was looking up myself a couple other companies that do the same kind of thing. And I think one of the biggest ones I found was HomeAway, probably the second biggest. And I thought it was a little bit interesting about them is that they're also a software service company, obviously, and they actually go through a lot of companies like Airbnb, things like the VRBO, Owners Direct, and they'll make reservations through that company, I believe, through another like house that is also a traveler, and make their money that way. So I was thinking that's kind of a new idea, but it also seems almost too complicated. Like it's starting to get to the point where they're adding steps that are necessary, and that's why I think that's so difficult for people to be comparing and competing with Airbnb. But like I said, that considering they have about 20% of the market, they have a lot lower fees than other companies, and they can still survive and not have any subscription fees. I mean, people can just like hop on and use it. Oops. Oh, I'm not sure what just happened. Sorry. There we go. Sorry. All right, here I just threw in a little graph to show the comparisons or the visual comparison of like how Airbnb and HomeAway are shown on the graph. And HomeAway is obviously way below. This is all the way up until 2018. But even if you wanted to compare Airbnb to like certain hotels and other more stationary companies that have been around for a while, they're still even in the conversation, which I think is pretty interesting.
Alrighty, so like Damien was talking about, Airbnb has some really low fees. They don't have subscription fees like many other companies do. And this little graph here will show how their gas lease in New York have almost doubled every year for the last decade. So a little bit about the revenues is the first quarter of 2019, they collected 9.4 billion bookings alone. From that, they had 282 million in income from that. So for the last decade, they've grown quite a bit. So yeah, next slide, please. So this is a very interesting part. Their plans to go public were ruined by COVID-19. In fact, their valuation went from 31 billion post money to 18 billion because of COVID-19. 54% of their revenue, of their sales went down also because of COVID-19, which contributed to the lower valuation of the company. They had to borrow a $1 billion investment from one of their investors. I believe it was Silver Lake. Not sure on that. Wasn't too clear on that. They're paying 10% interest rate on that investment just because they want to try and stay afloat during this pandemic. Next slide. So our strategy and our recommendation for this company is, first thing is go public. Once everything settles down, if they are able to do their initial public offering, they'll be able to get the funding they need to kind of make up for the losses they had during this pandemic. The other thing is a lot of customers have, switched over to other companies because of the issues they've had with the quality of rentals overseas. So increasing the quality of those rentals will help them keep more customers. Lastly, they have spent a lot in taxes in many other countries when they report it here in the United States. So they could either increase their fees just a little bit to make up for that, which will still allow them to be more affordable than many other companies, but will also help them increase their revenue. Questions?
I have a question, and I don't this might be an unanswerable or crystal ball question, but what are your guys' thoughts on when things from coronavirus, they're already beginning to settle down a little bit, but when they really settle down, do you think people will be there'll be a spike in demand from people having been kept inside for so long that they want to go on vacation, and there'll be kind of a spike recovery? Or do you think there'll still be a pretty hesitation from the market, and it'll take Airbnb a while to get back to where they were before?
I think there'll be a spike, but it won't be quite so literally a spike. I think there'll be a steep increase as people, because money is kind of gotten tight for a lot of people, so they might have to earn a little bit of money, and then maybe after a brief delay, it will go up. And then I think it will peak and then go back down to somewhat of a similar level it was before, because obviously people are a bit cooped up and they have that wanderlust. But I think they are in for a small boom, but it won't be an immediate effect, I don't think.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I've been in California for the past few weeks and actually bouncing around Airbnbs, and it's been really interesting to see the first week the prices that they were all the way to the third week. So even as things are kind of settling down, like the prices have just skyrocketed from like the consumer standpoint. And so, yeah, that's just been really interesting. Even we looked up the price of our same Airbnb from the first week, and it was up, I want to say $20 a day, just in a matter of a few weeks. So it's been pretty crazy. I don't know if that's same across the board, but that's how it is in California.
Yeah, it is true. And, kind of take that into perspective, because Airbnb is supposed to be more affordable than many other companies. So imagine how all the other companies and hotels are charging for their customers to stay in their property. So that's a very interesting thought. But kind of going back to Jaden's question, the spike on the demand for Airbnb will also be because of what we've been talking about, is the price. So when people are going to want to travel, like Ashland is in California, they're not going to look at other companies because they're going to be so expensive, and the unemployment rate is just crazy right now. So people are going to look at the cheapest thing, and that's going to help spike the demand for Airbnb.
And then can I ask just a follow-up question? Because those are great insights. It's widely believed that coronavirus is going to have like a second wave and possibly a third wave, but especially a second wave as we head into the winter season again. Is there anything Airbnb can do to try to respond to a second wave without having such a hit on their demand?
First of all, I think that's a great question, but I think that Airbnb, like one of the things that I've been seeing, at least as they've been going through this, is that there's been like regulations being put in place. Most of the time, it's just up to the actual person who owns the property and what kind of things they want to require of you as a guest to like use your property. But I believe like instigating some kind of like rules, things that you like need for people to actually use it will just help to keep it more safe. And the fact that a second wave is possible is I think that just like with any other company, it's like kind of like looking into the ball a little bit. Like we're not positive whether or not like it'll really affect I think it'll definitely affect them a ton if it happens. But like since we don't know whether or not it'll happen, I think the best way that Airbnb can respond is to just be prepared with like regulations, health regulations, be clean, and then try to keep their prices low to make sure that they can increase demand once people are allowed to go outside again.
So let me ask you a question in this as well. I'm not sure that this is simply a demand issue that they're facing. Are they facing some supply issues as well? Do you know anything of their supply problems?
I don't know anything specifically. I know that they still are having a lot of listings, even in the crisis. I saw that they still have around like 1 million or something like that listings around the world that were active. I don't know if they're being used, but I could see that there would be a supply problem as well. People who don't want other people in their homes for issues of a health crisis. That obviously makes a lot of sense.
One thing is people are unemployed right now, and they count on Airbnb listings to have some additional income. So while the supply has also gone down because people can't pay their rent, those who, let's say, already own the property and we're using that to just get some additional income, they are still wanting people to come in and use their property as a rental because they could be unemployed. I listened to a podcast and they were talking about how, at least in New York, they were wanting to have people use places, companies like Airbnb or Booking.com to go in and, kind of boost the economy that way as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. So they, and I don't know how much you guys have tracked this, but they created an interesting problem in their supply as we entered into the virus and the pandemic. Airbnb went ahead and announced that they were overriding the refund policies. So if the property owner had a refund policy that said you couldn't get any refunds if you canceled within 2 weeks or whatever it was, Airbnb overrode that and required 100% refunds and kind of strong-armed, if you will, their property owners. At the exact same time that the property owners were seeing massive bleed in having cancellations and not having revenue, and most of these property owners have mortgages on these properties. So no revenue, but they had expense, and they were being forced to provide full refunds. And so you got property owners that have left the Airbnb structure for some of the competitor structures. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out for them.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the downsides of Airbnb, at least during the current times, because all those other companies who charge a subscription, at least they have some more cash flow in that sense. So Airbnb has really taken a hit on that, and I don't know if we talked about that, but like when their revenue sales went down to 54%, that included the fee that they charge the hosts. So that was a big hit.
So Jens, I'm curious as to your comment or your response as an investor. What do you think about this $10 billion loan they had to take?
I just heard that on the news earlier this spring, like few weeks ago. So I'm not sure about the details and terms in that loan. But I mean, it's interesting with the 10% interest. It's certainly an expensive way to finance. But I'm not sure how long the term of that loan is, or if it's just temporary or something like that. So before I comment, I probably should understand the loan better. I wanted to challenge you, Rick, a little bit.
Cool.
So what you said about the hosts, and they have been treated poorly with the refunds and everything, and of course in a pressing time, they're not enjoying that. But once this is over, where are they going to go?
Well, it's a good point, and I'm not sure that I would suggest that the hosts have been treated poorly. I just know that they had more put into a squeeze, if you will, that made it more uncomfortable for them. And frankly, from the consumer standpoint, Airbnb did the right thing. It engendered consumers to them, which helps build their demand. And we all know that if there is sufficient demand, supply is going to follow in a market like this, right? This is essentially a freelance market, if you will. But it is causing them some interesting pains. And that $10 billion loan was largely a function, or what caused that $10 billion loan to come about was them dealing with this refund issue. And you guys have to understand the refunds being required by consumers has been massive, and this industry has been hit just as hard as the airline industry. And the airline industry needed loans of far greater than $10 billion.
Do you recall, Rick, what are the terms on that loan?
I don't recall the time frame. I was just taken aback by the 10%, and $10 billion is a big chunk of their overall valuation.
Oh, yes.
That's
massive.
from the investor standpoint, for me, that's frightening. That's frightening.
Yes, and I'm also frightened by I'm not sure how it's structured again, but the 10% interest. It's it's a big claim on the cash flows that can come out of the business in the short term, I would expect.
Oh, it's huge. The debt service on that, massive. Well, it'll be interesting.
I'm just reading it now. Apparently, it's a $1 billion loan, not a $10 billion loan.
Yeah, 1 billion, not 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I misunderstood. I thought it was 10.
10%
Yeah, they're still
interest.
getting gouged.
It's 10% interest, but 1 billion.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, that makes it a lot more palatable. Any other questions, guys? Well, nicely done. I will tell you, it might have been good to hear a little bit more about the management team and some of their marketing channels. But what we saw presented was an interesting presentation.